Hello world, Calc Programmer 1 here. Today I'm going to show you how I got my Razer core working with my Razer Blade Stealth under Linux. Earlier this week, a Reddit post came out on the Linux gaming subreddit, and it documented how to modify your BIOS on your Razer Blade Stealth and how to enable the Thunderbolt menu. Now, if you don't know anything about Thunderbolt, it's a Intel proprietary high-speed data link that uses the USB Type-C physical layer, and basically it allows you to present a PCI Express device such as this AMD R9 380X graphics card, which is in a PCI Express socket, to your laptop over a single connection. Now, one thing that Thunderbolt as of version 3 has is a security mode, and that is determined, whether or not it's necessary is determined by your BIOS. And on the Razer Blade Stealth and most new laptops that have Thunderbolt 3, the security mode is basically forced. You cannot turn it off. There are a few, I think Dell XPS models, that allow you to set legacy mode in the BIOS, and that turns off the security. Now, you may be wondering why this is important. Well, under Windows, there's a Thunderbolt software application, and whenever you plug in a new device that the computer's never seen before, it will pop up a menu saying you've connected a new device, do you want to authenticate it or do you want to allow it? And you just click yes and everything works. But if you want to use it under Linux, there is Thunderbolt support in the kernel, but there is no Thunderbolt security support yet. So if you have a computer where you can turn the security off, like a Dell XPS, and you plug in the Thunderbolt connection, your external device, such as a Razer core or any other GPU dock or other Thunderbolt device, will work just fine. But if you do the same on, say, a Razer Blade Stealth or any other laptop that forces the security mode, it will detect that you've plugged in a Thunderbolt device. The Thunderbolt controller will show up in the PCI device listing, but none of the remote devices will show up. And that is because it's not authenticated, so the driver doesn't know how to authenticate it, so it basically just ignores it. It doesn't exist. So, with that Reddit post, and I will show you the process that I did to modify my BIOS. I filmed it. I will put that in this video. I have modified the BIOS of my Blade Stealth, and in doing so, turned on the Thunderbolt menu. I'm gonna hit the lights and boot it up into the BIOS so you can see what I'm talking about. So as you can see in the BIOS, if you were to, on your own Blade Stealth, go to the Advanced menu, you would only see SATA and USB configuration. You would not see this Intel Thunderbolt option. That is the one that I added by modifying the BIOS using the BIOS editor. I basically extracted the BIOS, edited it with the BIOS editor, and then reflashed it to the laptop. And under this menu, under this Intel Thunderbolt menu, there's a whole bunch of Thunderbolt options that you can enable and disable, with security level being the important one. By default, it is set to unique ID, and that means that the security level, the unique ID of whatever device you connect, in my case the Razer core, must be authenticated with the Thunderbolt software before it's allowed to be used. And that, of course, does not work under Linux. But with this BIOS mod, where you unlock this menu, you can come in here and set legacy mode. And when you do that, Thunderbolt security is disabled completely, and Linux has full reign of the devices you plug into it. You can also enable things like the ability to boot over Thunderbolt, the ability to use devices connected to USB in the BIOS, a whole bunch of other things. I just went ahead and enabled most of this stuff. A lot of it was disabled, but I figure more features the better. The drivers for it in Linux might be tuned to use some of these things, so I'll turn them on. Now what I'm going to do is plug the Razer core into the laptop. I've powered the laptop completely off. I'm going to unplug the Razer core from the outlet, wait a little bit, and plug it back in just to make sure that everything is reset. I have Ethernet connected to the Razer core, and I have my 380X installed, but other than that, the only other connection is the one to the laptop. And my Razer core, I think I damaged it. I had a GPU burnout in it, and ever since, the fans go to 100% whenever I plug it in and the laptop is off. But otherwise it works completely fine, so when I plug this in, the fans are going to ramp up. But then turn it on, everything goes back to normal. Now I'm going to boot Ubuntu. What I've noticed is the AMD GPU driver doesn't work with the default 4.8 kernel. I've installed 4.10 RC5 on this computer, and with that kernel, the drivers for the AMD GPU work with the Thunderbolt connection, so that's the kernel I'm going to use. In addition, I've installed the Oibaf PPA, which is the up-to-date Mesa open source graphics drivers. So I've got all that installed on here. So now it's booted up. And open up Xterm because my GNOME terminal is broken for whatever reason. I'll just zoom in on that. And what we can do is do ls PCI, and what you can see in there, my camera will focus, is right here. You can see an AMD Tonga XT, which is the R9 380X. You can see the Tonga HDMI audio. So my graphics card is being detected. And then if I do ls USB, I have this A6 Electronics Corp Ethernet controller, which is the Ethernet controller built into the core. Now, of course, the other thing I can do that I've added support for and have submitted a pull request for is I have a modified version of Terry Kane's Razer Chroma drivers that I added support for the core, so you can control the chroma lighting. My Linux version of Keyboard Visualizer supports the core now through this driver, so you can control the lighting, which is a USB device, by the way. And if we do glx info grep renderer, we get Mesa DRI Intel Graphics 520, so the integrated GPU. So how do we use the external GPU? Well, we can do DRI underscore prime equals 1 glx info grep renderer. And you now see Gallium 0.4 on AMD Tonga, which is the external GPU. So if I do DRI prime equals 1 glx gears, that is rendering on the AMD GPU. And if I run Unigine Heaven, I'm going to pick ultra quality, moderate tessellation, anti-aliasing off, full screen at 1080p. That's the settings I usually use. We can see that it is definitely going to outperform an Intel GPU. Although it doesn't perform quite as well as I would have hoped. This being an experimental, like, early Thunderbolt on Linux is still kind of an early thing, so there's probably room for optimization. Same with DRI Prime. But I've had this run at much higher frame rates. I also have VSync on right now, so it's not really a good benchmark. But I didn't get much higher than 30, even with VSync off. But that's at 1080p. It looks pretty good. So the GPU is definitely working. And we can also do DRI prime equals 1 Steam. And let's play Counter-Strike. Okay, so I launched CSGO on with DRI prime equals 1 to run Steam after I mounted my hard drive. I'm going to plug in a mouse. Now, just for reference, I'll show my settings, and it's audio. Just video. I know it's not recommended to play CS with any sort of VSync on, and yeah, it does lag a little bit, but this doesn't run quite perfectly, and with it off, I get a lot of stuttering. So I'm going to leave this on triple buffered. And I turned the settings down to medium. It's not perfect, but it is sort of playable. I don't want to actually find a legitimate game. Let's play against bots just for testing. It is a bit laggy. It's running at 58 frames per second, but there's some stutter here and there. And there's some input lag. And it's hard to play from this angle because the camera's in the way. In the indoor areas, it's a lot smoother. It's running at a smooth 60 now, but when you get to an area that it needs to load into memory, it seems like it has a little bit of a stutter. I don't know how much of this is related to the Thunderbolt bandwidth and how much is due to the optimization of the AMD drivers. Okay, so I've installed Tomb Raider, so let's go ahead and try it. So let's pick up our settings here. 1080p is a good start. I guess that's all you can select from this menu. So let's go ahead and play. Let's put on triple buffer VSync. Go with high settings, but I'm going to turn up anisotropic and put on tress effects and see how that handles. And apparently tress effects isn't supported because the hair quality looks normal. So it's running between 30 and 40 frames per second. So, what can we do? Well, today, a Reddit user, Dokibatt, actually found a solution through the means of BIOS mod. And what he did was he modified his Razer Blade Stealth BIOS with the BIOS editor, found that the option to enable Legacy Thunderbolt 3 mode exists in the BIOS but is hidden, and then made it so that you could see that BIOS option, and then was able to use it to connect his Razer core to his Razer Blade Stealth under Linux. So in this video, I am going to do just that. I'm going to pull the BIOS off of my Razer Blade Stealth, modify it, reflash it, and hopefully not break it. So to do this, I will post a link in the description below with the links to the Reddit threads as well as to the thread that he linked to. To do this though, first we're going to have to boot into Windows. So I'm going to reboot into Windows. And then we have to download some programs. The BIOS Flash tool, which will allow you to extract your existing BIOS as well as flash a new one. And then also the BIOS editing tool, which we can use to enable the Thunderbolt option in the BIOS. So let me pull that thread back up. So as you can see, Thunderbolt works fine on here. It's detected my AMD graphics card. So now we can see this Reddit thread. And what we're going to do is follow the link he posted, which was to a thread on the notebookreview.com site. And basically, we need to download this AFU Win GUI program, which is the BIOS extractor and flashing tool. So we'll go ahead and click this link. Scroll through the meaningless stuff. Click accept. Save that. And now we can go back to the notebook review forum. And then we also need this AMI BCP BIOS editor. And he has a link to that as well. So let's go ahead and download that. Now I'm going to just copy the utility to my desktop. And the folder we need to go to is AMI flash, Aptio V, AFU, AFU Win /64. So Aptio V, which is the latest version, AFU, AFU Win 64, and this is also a zip file, so I'm going to just copy, paste, and now we can run the program, which is AFU Win GUI. We open that, and it comes with this window, and it has detected the BIOS, which is good. Now what we're going to do is click Save, and I'm going to just put it on desktop and call it bladestealth.rom. You click Save. Now it's reading blocks of data from the BIOS memory. And the BIOS has been saved. We can go ahead and close that. Okay, so I've extracted. Okay, so I installed 7-zip and I extracted the appropriate files. We're going to want to run this AMI BCP64 program. When you open it, it's just going to be a blank window like this. Go ahead and open, and then I'm going to click on my bladestealth.rom that I saved earlier. And so we can see in here that there are some different items that are part of the BIOS. If we click down on this plus, we can go into all of our different configuration items. Under Setup, the first folder is going to be our menu entries. And you can see by looking through here that there are a bunch of different settings, but the one we want is going to be under Advanced. So look at Advanced, and there's going to be a bunch of different items. And one of the last one here is Intel Thunderbolt. And so what I'm going to do is go to security level, which is the setting that we really want to change. I'm going to click down on here where it says access use column. That's basically whether it's showing or not in the BIOS. I'm going to click user. User means that it is shown. Default in this case is not shown. And then I'm going to just save. I'm going to save as. Do Blade Stealth modified.rom. Now it's going to save the ROM image. Well, it's not here. Guess that means we try again. Gonna reopen our modified BIOS. Go back to the setup. Look under advanced. Maybe it's because in the advanced tab we saw that USB configuration was showing, and I think maybe it was NVMe configuration. One of these other ones was showing, but not all of them were showing. So I think what we need to do is turn on the Intel Thunderbolt menu. I'll zoom in so you can actually see what I'm doing here. This is the advanced tab of the BIOS, which, if you remember correctly, they were across the top of the screen. And we had like main, advanced, and what were the other ones? Security, boot, and save and exit. And some of these were not showing. So in advanced we only had, I think it was NVMe configuration maybe, and USB configuration, but we didn't have Intel Thunderbolt showing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to advanced, and I'm going to go down here to Intel Thunderbolt, which is the sub option to get to that menu. And I don't know if it's set to show up or not. So I'm going to put that at user. That way the Thunderbolt menu will show up. And of course now I'm going to save my modified image again. Okay, so I've saved our modified image. We are going to close and open our Flash utility again. Try this again. So open, I'm going to open my modified ROM again and just hit Flash and wait. We're good. So now we get to wait for this whole process to go again. This is the critical part when it's erasing and programming. Don't shut your computer off, you'll brick it. But it's a battery powered computer, we've got full charge, we're plugged in. No background programs, so it's safe to flash. Let it verify. And we're done. Exit. And you know the drill. Shut down. And go ahead and unplug the Razer core, because I think my Razer core is a bit broken in that when the computer powers off, the fans ramp up to full speed. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I don't really want to send it in. Go ahead and hit delete a bunch of times. And if we are lucky, the next page should have a Thunderbolt option. Ready, set, hey, look at that. Intel Thunderbolt. Hit enter. Oh wow, look at all of this stuff. So, Thunderbolt technology is enabled. Thunderbolt boot support is disabled. That's cool. I mean, being able to boot from a Thunderbolt device, I'm definitely going to enable that at some point. But for now, the important part is legacy mode. Legacy mode, now we can run Linux. Let's do it. Save and exit.